From our mechanics of solid knowledge, we know that stress is given by resisting force per unit area. But what kind of stress is this? Is this the actual stress scenario which occurs in a complex geometries, complex bodies when it is subjected to complex loading, or this is just an average stress? For that, what we'll do is we'll take this example of this bar, which is subjected to say point load P, and then if I take one cross section, if and will assume that this is very long bar, and then if I take any cross section which is very far from this applied loads, and then if I try to see the resisting forces which are developed on this surface, then we will see that the stresses which are developed here, I mean the resisting forces which are developed here are uniform. And then therefore in this case what we can do is we can nicely say that the stresses which will be developed will be equal to this average resultant force of this average resultant of this resisting force divided by the cross sectional area, if this is the cross sectional area A. Fine. So basically what this expression gives us is it gives us the average stress on any cross section. So with this assumption, I mean with this expression of stress, we say that the stresses will be uniform across this cross section, across this entire cross section. But this is valid only for simple shapes, like simple shapes or geometries, simple shapes or geometries like bar, beam, and so on and so on. But what if we have a complex geometry with complex loading, like in this case, and then if I want to find the stresses, can I really use this formula stress equal to P by A in this case? Then our question will be, if we have to use this expression here to calculate stress, then our question will be which force to be considered from this, or which area to be considered from this. And therefore this definition of this average stress is do not hold good for this kind of complex geometry and complex loading. So in this case we have to go with a definition of stress as a stress at a point, and this we can define as stress at a point. Stress at a point can be defined as delta P, I mean delta R by delta A, in limiting case as delta A tends to 0. What this means is that if I have a, if I consider a cross sectional area which is very close to this applied force P, all right, and then if I draw this cross sectional area here, and then we have applied this force P, then one will observe that the resisting forces developed are not uniform at each point. It will be different at each point. So if I consider one small area here, and then if I try to see how much is the resisting force on this small area, it may be delta R, and then this small area can be denoted as delta A. Now in this case a stress at a point, at this small point, can be defined as delta R by delta A as limit delta A tends to 0. Basically this, since this limit delta A is tending to 0, that means this area is becoming very small and small. It won't be equal to 0, but it will tend to 0. Basically it will converge to a point. So this is the meaning of stress at a point. All right. So stress at a, and this is the proper definition of stress at a point. So from here we come to know that stress changes from point to point. Of course this is also a very useful definition of stress, but it will not be applicable to any general body which is subjected to very complex loading. But if we want to analyze this kind of systems, we have to appreciate the fact that stresses does not remain constant or average on a surface area, but it changes, it continuously changes from point to point. And for this, what we will do is, we will consider this body a general, very general three-dimensional body, which is subjected to here different kinds of forces F1, F2, F3. Also, it is subjected to a distributed force P, and then it has some reactions here. It is supported with these reactions R1, R2, R3, and then this also can be considered as a reaction forces later on in the analysis. But for time being, we need to identify now here how many types of forces this body is subjected to. And for this, we will see how many types of forces in general can act on a body. Now, the first kind of force which can act on a body is called as body force. All right. Now, what is body? What are body forces? Body forces are those forces which acts on the entire body, on the whole body. For example, a gravitational force. The gravitational force will act on every particle of this body. All right. So the forces which acts on the entire body, on every particle of the body, are called as body forces. Example, as I had said, first example can be gravitational force. The second example can be electromagnetic force or magnetic force, which will act on the which will act on every particle of the body, electromagnetic force. Then there can be inertia forces, and so on. So basically these are the forces which acts on the entire volume, and that is the reason the unit of this kind of forces which acts on the entire volume is given by Newton per meter cube. The units of body forces is given by Newton per meter cube, because these are the forces which acts on which these forces acts on entire volume, and therefore the unit will be Newton per meter cube. Similarly, a second type of force which can act on a body can be called as surface surface force or surface forces. All right. Now this kind of forces acts on the surface. That means basically these are the type of forces which we can apply on any surfaces. For example, if you try to press the desk or say table very hard with your hand, that means what basically you are doing is you are inserting a surface force on the surface of the table, right? So those kind of forces are called as surface forces. Now since these forces acts on the surface, since this forces acts on the surface, the unit of this force will be Newton per meter square. All right. So unit of this forces, surface forces, will be Newton per meter square, since it acts on the surface, on the unit area. All right. And then the third kind of force can be called as tractions. Can be called as tractions. Now, what are tractions? Tractions are nothing but tractions are also surface forces. But if the surface forces happens to act on the actual boundary of the object, then the surface forces can be called as traction. So basically, traction is nothing but it is a fancy word for, you can say it is a fancy word for pressure. So traction is nothing but surface forces per unit area is can be called as tractions. All right. And then if surface forces happens to act on very small concentrated small areas, like in this case these forces are acting on very small areas. Here it is acting on very small areas compared to the entire surface area of this body, or of this object, right? If the surface forces happens to be acting on very small area on a object or on a body, those kind of forces will be called as concentrated forces, or they are also called as point forces. And the unit of this concentrated force or point force will be Newton. All right. So these are the types of forces which can act on any body. So those forces are body forces. and surface forces. Under surface forces we have tractions, which are the special cases of surface forces. They are traction and concentrated forces. All right, let us come with this knowledge, let us come back to this body again. So this body here, it is subjected to concentrated forces and it is subjected to distributed force or surface forces here, P, and then it will be also subjected to this reaction forces. Of course, there will be reactions which will be developed, right, because of this applied forces. So there will be again reaction forces here at this point, R1, R2 and R3. And then what we will assume is, under all these forces and supports, this body is under equilibrium. So this will be our assumption. What we'll assume is, under the under under the action of forces, this this body is this body is under equilibrium. This body is under equilibrium. All right, and then what we will do is, we will consider one point here, point P, wherein we will try to see how the stresses are developed because of all these forces. So we have considered here one point inside this body. Now what we will do is, we will cut this body. I mean, we are not actually cutting this body, but what we will do is, we will pass one plane in this body which passes through this point P. All right, so across this point P, we will cut it through a plane 1 1 which passes through this point P, and it will cut it here at this area. It will cut this body, and then what I will do is, this part I will draw it separately here as part C, and the bottom part I will draw here separately as part D. Alright, so this top part has been drawn here as part C, and the bottom part has been drawn here as part D. And then the reactions have been shown in terms of reaction forces R1, R2 and R3. So basically this is the free body diagram of a body cut into parts. We have not actually physically cut it, but we have assumed that we have made them into two different parts. Now what will happen in this case is, if we analyze these two parts separately, then because of all these forces on part C, the reaction force delta T, or I can also call this as, delta F, whatever you feel like. I will call this as delta F. The reaction force delta F will be developed at point P in this part D. Now let me again remind you, this point is same, right? This point is this P. This P is what we have considered here, but I am calling this point P dash here in this segment, in segment D. I will call this point as P dash. In this segment D, I will call this point as P. But basically they are same point. Similarly, we have considered one small area across this point with, and I will call that as delta A dash in part C, whereas here I will call it as delta A. All right, and then we will get here the forces. Now because of all these forces, the action, because the action of this part C on this part D, there will be a resultant force delta F which will be developed here. And similarly, because of all these forces, because of the action of this uh, part on this point P dash, there will be a resultant force exactly in the opposite direction and of equal magnitude at P dash, that will be delta F1 dash. Fine, delta F1 dash, and this I can call it as delta F1. Basically why I am calling that these terms as 1 and 1 is because this is the first plane. It is a plane 1 which has cut this entire body into two parts. So I am calling them as 1 because of this plane 1. I am calling these terms as delta F1 and delta F1 dash. Basically what you can do is, you can consider it to be a reaction force, a resultant reaction force at this point. Because of all these forces, this is the resultant reaction force at this point. All right, and we can denote these small areas with its outward normal n1 and n1 dash. I can denote small areas with its outward normal n1 and n1 dash. So basically these are the same areas, but since it is on part C I am marking it as delta A dash, and since this is on part D I am marking it as delta A. Similarly n1 is the outward normal of this small area delta A. Similarly n1 dash is the outward normal of this small area delta A dash. Delta F1 is the resultant reaction force on this segment at point P. Similarly, delta F1 dash is the resultant reaction force at this point P dash in the segment C. So in limiting condition, again what we can do is, in limiting condition, here what we can say is limit as delta A tends to 0, limit delta A tends to 0, this delta F1 dash divided by delta A dash will become df1 dash by da dash, and I can denote this as t dash 1. I can call this as t dash 1. So basically what this means is, this is giving us a stress vector t1. This limiting condition is giving us the stress vector t1 dash at this point. So here I am getting t1 dash as a stress vector. All right. Similarly, if I apply this limiting case here, as this should have been delta A dash, right? Similarly, if delta A tends to 0, I'll get same thing, delta F1 by delta A will be df1 by dA, and this will give us T1. So what are this T1 and T1 dash? T1 and T1 dash are nothing but they are called as stress vectors. All right, these are not tensors, but they are called as stress vectors. And what they represent, and the stress vector represents forces per unit area, forces per unit area, forces per unit area, acting 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 respectively at P and P dash on planes on plane which was our plane 1 here, with with outward normal, with outward normals. What were our outward normals? It was n1 and n1 dash. And by using Newton's third law of motion, and by considering that this body is in equilibrium under the action of forces, we can conclude that this stress vectors T1 has to be equal to T1 dash. All right, this T1 has to be equal to T1 dash. Only then this entire body will be under equilibrium. That is, stress vector T1 representing the action of C on D, representing the action of C on D at P is equal in magnitude and opposite in direction to stress vector T1 dash. So because of this, T1 will be equal to T1 dash. Now similarly, what we will do is, now here we had considered one plane which was passing through this point P. Now again we'll consider a new plane, a plane 2, which passes through the same point P but at some different orientation. Let us say now we will try to cut this body from the same point P, but the orientation of that plane will be in different direction. Altogether it will be in different direction. So let us say that it is passing through this side. All right, it is passing in this direction now. In this direction it is trying to cut this body. Earlier it was trying to cut this body in this direction, right? But now it will try to cut this body in this direction. But again, let me remind you that it is passing through this point P. Again, it is passing through this point P. Now in this case, again same thing will happen, because of the action of this segment on this point, and because of action of all these forces on this point, we will end up getting two forces, two resultant forces, F2 and F2 dash and F2, F2 dash and F2, and then in limiting case, what we will get is as limit delta A tends to 0, again this same area delta A, and this will be delta A as delta A tends to 0. In fact, this should have been delta A dash, right? This should be delta A dash tends to 0. We will get what? Delta F2 dash divided by delta A, which will be dF2 by dA, and this will give us T2 dash. Similarly, for this, what will happen is limit as delta A tends to 0, delta F2 divided by delta A will give us dF2 by dA, and this will be T2. And with this same argument, again we will get this T2 is equal to T2 dash. And similarly, if we go on cutting this body at this point with different planes, and in fact there can be n number of planes which can pass through this point, right? If you just go on cutting it with different plane, then we'll go on getting 3 equal to 3 T3 dash, T4 equal to T4 dash, and so on. But what we can observe here is every time when we are changing the plane at this point, we will get a different resultant stress vector. I mean different stress vectors. Earlier when a plane was passing with certain orientation at this point, we got the stress vectors as T1 and T1 dash. Similarly, when the stress vector was passing through some other orientation, second orientation from same point, we got the stress vectors as T2 and T2 dash. Similarly, if we take some other orientation, third orientation, we'll get it as 3 and T3 dash. Now, this tells us that the stress as such, the stress at a point not only depends on magnitude and direction, but it also depends on the plane on which it acts. And this is a big statement what I have said, that is, we will look now the stress as a state of stress at a point, right? Now what happens is, since infinite number of planes can pass through this point, right? There can be infinite number of planes that can pass through this point. So at every plane we will get different stress vectors. Like for plane 1 we got stress vector as T1. For plane 2 we got stress vector as T2. For plane 3 we got stress vector as T3, and then so on. All right, now the totality of all these stress vectors, which will be generated for different planes acting on the every possible plane, passing through the point, this point or any point of consideration, is defined to be state of stress at a point. And this is a very important definition. All right, so what is state of stress at a point? We saw that if we go on changing the orientation of plane at this point P, we will end up getting different stress vector T1, T2, T3, T4, and so on. So the totality of all these stress vector on every possible plane passing through the point is defined to be the state of stress at this point. So state of stress at a point is nothing but it is totality of all these stress vector, and this state of stress at a point will not be vector as such, but it will be tensor in nature. Although these are the stress vectors, we call them stress vectors because they were on a specific plane. This stress vector T1 was with respect to this plane 1, right? It was with respect to a specific plane, and that is why we called it as stress vector. Similarly, this stress vector T2 was on a specific plane. But if we talk about a state of stress at a point, then there can be n number of planes, and therefore we cannot call the stress as a vector anymore at a point, but we will have to call them as a tensor, because it will depend on magnitude and direction, but it also depends on what? It also depends on plane on which it acts. But if we are projecting the stress along some plane, along one particular plane, in that case, if we are projecting the stress along one particular plane, then we can call them it as a stress vector. But as a state of stress at a point, we cannot call the stress as a tensor, as a vector, but we'll have to call it as a tensor. Now it is the knowledge of this state of stress at a point which is very important for a design engineer in determining the critical plane and the respective critical stresses. So this becomes a very important deal for a design engineer, the state of stress at a point. Subsequently, in the later sections, we'll also see that if the stress vectors can be found on any three mutually perpendicular planes. Now, we saw that in order to determine the state of stress, we have to find the totality of all stress vectors, right? But it will not be feasible to find stress vector on every plane passing through this point, because there can be infinite number of planes, and to determine the state of to determine the stress vectors at every point, it is not possible. But later on, what we will see is that if somehow we can find the state of stress on three mutually perpendicular planes, if somehow we can find the state of stress on three mutually perpendicular planes, like these are our three mutually perpendicular planes, right? And suppose that this is our point of interest, and if somehow we can find the stresses on three mutually perpendicular planes passing through this point, then we'll see that how to find the stresses on any other plane passing to this point. Without doing all this analysis again, we will see, we will develop some equations which will help us to find the stresses on any arbitrary plane passing through this point, provided we know the stress vectors on these three perpendicular planes, mutually perpendicular planes. So this is the importance of stress at a point. Now let us see how we can project this stress vector along different axes. So for this, what we will do is, we will consider one more three-dimensional body which is already cut now. It is this way, it is in this form as we have drawn here, it is in this form, right? And then we have considered here one point, right? We have considered here one point, and then we can represent this area, we can represent this surface, or we can represent this plane with a outward normal, and that has been shown here with n. N is nothing but it is a outward normal vector which represents the orientation of this plane. So this is the outward normal of this plane. Basically, this outward normal tells us what is the orientation of a plane with respect to given frame of reference. Somehow, if we can find what is the resultant stress vector at this point on this plane, suppose say that is t. If suppose say the resultant stress vector is say t, resultant stress vector is t on this plane whose outward normal is n. That's why I have written it as t cap n, because this plane is identified by its outward normal which is n, and therefore I am showing the resultant stress vector as n. Now since this is a stress vector and not a state of stress at a point, right? It is a stress vector which is projected along this plane. Now since it is a vector, what I can do is I can very well resolve it along the directions I want, because it is a vector now, it is a stress vector. It is no more a stress at a point, but it is a stress vector because I have projected it along this point. And because of that, what I can do is I can project it along the normal direction of this plane. And if I do that, if I project it along the normal direction of the plane, I can call it as a normal stress. As we are aware of, if the stresses are acting normal to the plane, we call them as a normal stress. And this n specifies that, this n represents that it is for this plane whose outward normal is n. So I can resolve it along this outward normal, and I can call it as sigma, right? So basically t, I can call it as n sigma, or sigma times t equal to sigma times n. I can call it this way, or else I can even project it along the plane, right? Along the plane. Basically, you must be knowing this. If we have a frame of reference here x and y, and then if I have a force vector F, and if I know this angle is theta, then its projection along x-axis I can write it as what, F cos of theta, and its projection along y-axis I can write it as F sine of theta. Now similarly, I am projecting this resultant stress vector along the normal, and I can call it as a normal stress, or if I project it along the plane, I can call it as a shear stress. Alright, normal stress and shear stress, normal stress and shear stress. So this is how I can resolve a given resultant stress vector along the plane or perpendicular to the plane. Just to repeat, if I resolve it along the plane, I can call it as a shear stress. If I project it along the normal, I can call it as a normal stress. Now the way I have resolved it along normal and along the plane, similarly what I can do is I can even resolve this stress vector, resultant stress vector along the along our frame of reference, along the frame of reference. Now our frame of reference is what? It is x-axis, y-axis and z-axis. So what I can do is I can even resolve this stress vector along x-axis, y-axis and z-axis. Now in this case, this stress vector which is resolved along the x-axis can be called as Tx. Similarly, if we resolve it along y-axis, we will call it as Ty. And if we resolve it along z-axis, we will call it as Tz. So, what we understand from this topic, normal and shear stress components, is that a resultant stress vector can be resolved along the normal or along the plane. If we resolve it along the normal, we get normal stress vector, I mean normal stress. If we resolve it along the plane, we get shear stress. And if we want, we can even resolve it along our frame of reference, along our axis. That is, I can resolve it for as follows. I can resolve it as along x-axis I can call it as Tx, along y-axis I can call it as Ty, and along z-axis I can call it as Tz. So once I resolve it along the normal and along the plane, I can write the equation as follows. I can say this resultant stress vector is nothing but it will be sigma n square plus tau n square. We know this, right? If we have vectors and if I want to find the resultant vector, I can do it in following manner. Similarly, if I project it along this axis, if I project it along the axis, then I can write this as, how I can write this as, I can write this as Tn again square will be Tx n square plus Ty n square plus Tz n square. So I have an option of resolving the resultant stress component the way I want. I can either resolve it along the axis or I can resolve it along the normal of the plane and along the plane. So this way also I can resolve the resultant stress vector. Even this way I can resolve or I can project the resultant stress vector. Next concept which we will be looking at is rectangular stress component. So again we have considered a same general three-dimensional body. We have considered again the general three-dimensional body here, and then what I have done here is I have cut it with a plane. I have cut it with a plane which is parallel to this YZ plane. I have cut this body with a plane which is parallel. This plane is parallel to the YZ plane. Since this plane is parallel to the YZ plane, its outward normal will be in the x direction. Its outward normal will be in the x direction. Since this plane which I had used to cut this is along YZ plane, its outward normal, which is perpendicular to this plane, will be in x direction. So that is why its outward normal n is in x direction, and therefore I can call this plane, or I can call this plane as x plane. The reason to call this plane as x plane is because its outward normal is in x direction, or it is along x axis. And after cutting this plane, let us say the resultant stress vector on this plane is acting somewhat like this, Tx, because since this is x plane now, whose outward normal is in x direction, I am calling it as Tx. All right. and then further I can resolve this stress vector in along its axis the way we had done here. We had resolved this stress vector along the axis x, y, and z. Similarly, I will resolve this stress vector in x, y, and z. Then in that case, the stress vector which is acting along the normal will be called as can be represented as tau xx, because it is acting on x plane, acting on x plane and in x direction, right? This is x direction and x direction. I can call it as tau xx. This component I can call it as tau xx. Similarly, its projection along y-axis will be this component, and it will be tau xy. The reason to call it as tau xy is because it is again acting on x plane. It is acting on x plane, but now it is going in y direction. Similarly, its third component in z-axis will be tau xz. The reason to call it as tau xz is because again same x plane, but it is acting in z direction. It is acting in z direction. So this is how I can resolve the stress vector Tx in x, y, and z direction on x plane. Now similarly, if I cut this body with a y plane, I will get the stress vector in on that y plane. I can again similarly I can resolve it on xy in xyz axis, and in that case I will get it like this. All right. By the way, if the plane and direction both are same, we can directly say that it is a normal stress vector, and we can very well denote it as sigma x rather than showing it as tau xx. Right. Tau xx is same as sigma x or sigma xx. All these three quantities are one and the same. Similarly, here if I cut it by a y plane, I will get it the stresses developed on this face as this. Similarly, if I cut it with z plane, if I cut it with z plane, I will get the stresses as, sorry, here if I cut it with the z plane, I will get the stresses as this. All right, sigma zz, tau zx, tau zy. All right, this is our x axis, this is our y axis, and this is our z axis. So these are basically the rectangular stress components. Now to list down how many stress components we have on this plane. On the x plane we have sigma x, we have tau xy, we have tau xz. On y plane we have sigma y, tau yx, and tau yz. On z plane we have sigma z, tau zx, tau zy. So we are getting 3 by 3, 9 stress component. So if I consider one small point in this, and if I enclose it with a very small volume, which is this volume is in the limit delta x, delta y, and delta z tends to 0. That means it is almost overlapping this point. And if I enlarge it here, if I enlarge this volume here, I can very well say that these will be the stresses on this point P, because although this cube looks here same, but it is just enclosing this point. All right, so even this cube can be called as a point itself. All right, so these are the 9 stress components which will be generated on 3 perpendicular planes of this point. So these are called as rectangular stress components, and to put them in order, I can represent them as tau ij. What is I and j? I represents the plane, j represents the direction, and this can be put down as sigma x, tau xy, tau xz. Then this can be called as tau xy, sigma y, and tau yz. This can be called as tau xz, tau yz, and sigma z. Right. Now here I have directly written this tau yx as tau xy, but in our coming sessions we will see that tau xy will be equal to tau yx. This is because of equality of cross shear. So this is called as rectangular stress components. Also, what we can observe from this is that there are some negative faces also. Now this plane and this plane are the positive faces because their outward normal will be in the direction of positive x-axis, positive y-axis and positive z-axis. But what about this plane here, this plane and this plane? Their outward normal will be in the negative direction, right? And because of that, the stresses developed will be in the negative direction on those planes, just to balance those negative outward normals. All right. So this is also what you need to carefully observe in this.